L'importante è che lo vedano.
E lei
E mi dire quanto possono parlare.
dovrebbe avere la sua recita, prende e risponde ai gruppi tematici più importanti, così ha fatto.
Se prendiamo posto così cominciamo.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you could take your seats, please.
Poi i parlamentari cosa facciamo qui dentro? Qui dentro ci sono 40 parlamentari.
No, siamo 71 in commissione. Cari colleghi,
Dear colleagues, this afternoon it's a great pleasure for us to start off our activities in the committee with a meeting with the Presidency of Council, and I would like to thank Minister Galletti, Gian Luca, for having joined us this afternoon. Now, for an Italian Environment Minister, today is particularly important, and as such we should be thanking him twice, because he is responsible for all of the operations that have to do with, in fact, the Concordia, and perhaps really he would have preferred to have been on board ship, but he chose instead to come here. And I'd pass the floor to him so that he can present to us the priorities of the Italian presidency over the next 6-month period. You have the floor, Minister. Thank you very much, Chairman. Honourable members of Parliament, if I may, I would like to start by thanking all of you, members of the Parliament, your chairman and your vice chairs, for having given me this very important opportunity of speaking to you and of giving me the opportunity of telling you about and discussing with you the environment programme of the Italian presidency, just a month into the presidency. And let me start by underlining one thing, and that is the fact that this presidency would like to cooperate continuously and fruitfully with you in the European Parliament in order to agree on progress to be made on certain subjects and to have exchanges on certain subjects which cannot be concluded under the Italian presidency unless we take your views into account. And this is a point that I really would like to stress. I am totally aware of the fact that if we actually want to make progress in this 6-month period, and in fact throughout your whole term of office, then close cooperation between the Parliament and the Council is going to have to be the order of the day. And I do believe that particularly when it comes to the subjects that fall within our remit, namely the environment, it is of vital importance that we overcome any political differences that divide us. When it comes to the environment, the political families in Europe have a clear duty to reach agreements that will solve the problems, that are national, that are European and international in scope. This is a major responsibility that lies before us, and the environment programme of the Italian presidency is based on the subjects of green growth and green jobs, and takes account of the progress made in environment ministers' council meetings under the Lithuanian and Hellenic presidencies, and I would like to thank those presidencies for the excellent work they did. This is of fundamental importance. In the Italian presidency, not just in the environment, but in all sectors, we've put at the heart of our programme the subject of growth and jobs. I think that now we, when looking at the environment, should be clearing our minds so as to ensure that we concentrate on the essential points. We have to change the way in which we look at things. The environment has to be at the heart of jobs and growth. We have to protect the environment, which is of course our primary objective, but we also have to make it clearly understood that in Europe, in the member states, throughout the world, we can't continue having unsustainable growth. We can't change that, though, and have sustainable growth or indeed jobs unless the environment is put at the heart of all of our policies. Environment is going to determine the jobs and the growth of our planet in the future, and that is the challenge facing us now. And I think if you look at the figures too, it's quite clear now that if there's one sector that grew during the economic crisis in terms of turnover and in terms of jobs too, it was the green economy, that which has to do with the environment. Using that as a starting point, we really have to take a further leap forward in cultural terms and to make it clear to everybody in Europe that growth and jobs can be created in the green economy, but in all sectors of the economy by being green, even in those sectors which in the past weren't. The cement sector, just to give an example, that's one sector where we also need an environment policy. We have to move out of the isolating of the green economy. The environment can't be relegated to just a part of the economy. It has to be mainstreamed into all sectors of the economy. The Italian presidency has underlined on various occasions that the priority of our semester is going to be jobs and growth. Growth is vital if we want to shore up recovery and also restore the faith and trust of Europeans in their institutions and in politics. I talked about trust in institutions. The last elections sent a very clear message to us. If we're not able to take decisions rapidly that reflect the interests of the citizens that we represent, not only will this legislature not go down in history as being a success, but we will be undermining the whole of the project of the European Union, and that's something we cannot permit. We really do need a wake-up call. Environmental policies, which are to a great extent supported by public opinion in all of the countries of the Union, could be an efficient instrument for re-synchronizing European choices and bringing them in line with the hopes and expectations of citizens. Economic development, combating climate change, all of these are issues that for the Italian presidency are an integral part of the same strategy, because we are convinced that the growth that we should be trying to achieve, which will ensure that Europe's systems are competitive, has to be green growth. And these are subjects that were discussed in Milan at the informal ministerial meeting, bringing together environment and employment ministers on 7th of July. That was the first time that environment ministers met with employment ministers at the same meeting to discuss their two remits, employment and environment, and what instruments our countries can use to actually combat what I feel is the scourge of our century, namely unemployment, in particular youth unemployment. Economic development. Milan's success did confirm that an integrated political approach is vital if we are to be able to exploit the potential for jobs and, in fact, tackle the challenges that come from moving to a low-coal economy, which will be resilient to climate change and which will be based on the efficient use of resources and energy. During the presidency, we will try and ensure that the annual growth report, which kicks off the so-called European semester, will also have a specific annex on green jobs. Now, that will be a historic change in the governance of the European semester. And in the governance of the European semester, as things stand, we have the Employment Council and the Finance Council Ministers meeting. What we are suggesting is that, in addition, the Environment Council should also be represented so as to ensure that environment issues are at the heart of our policies. And here again, your support for that approach as the European Parliament will be of fundamental importance. Now, we need to move from a brown economy to a green economy. We need to mitigate the possible negative consequences that this could have on existing jobs. Appropriate industrial policies should therefore accompany this transition process. The European semester and the mid-term review of the Europe 2020 strategy for sustainable, smart and inclusive growth represents an important opportunity for putting the environmental component of the strategy at the heart of this whole process. The challenge facing us is to reverse and move beyond once and for all the traditional approach of the relationship between economic policies and the environment, which are based on the whole on trying to, in fact, reverse the environmental impact, negative environmental impact of the economic choices that we've made. Economic choices now have to take into account their environmental impact, because experience has shown that taking the environment into account in our countries has become indispensable if our companies are to be able to compete and to be industrially respected. So our industrialists and our companies need to take the environment into account if they are to be able to compete internationally and indeed be profitable. We have to lay the basis for moving towards a circular economy where nothing is wasted. Today, the model that is too prevalent is that of taking things, processing them and throwing away. That takes up resources. We lose valuable resources and we produce huge amounts of waste. It's clear to everybody that this model is no longer sustainable. It's costly, it's polluting, it leads to economic crises and therefore to the loss of jobs and therefore to the loss of profits for company owners. From the debates in Milan, it became clear that there was a consensus on reinforcing the environmental component of the economic governance of the European Union, both in terms of content, but also in terms of decision-making processes. As President in Office of the European Environment Council of Ministers, over the next few months I will be committing myself to providing follow-up to this process of reinforcing the environmental component within the European semester, bringing together the points that were raised in Milan. I feel that along this path, the contribution of the European Parliament will be substantial. And I do hope that in your debate too, we will in fact hear such interesting points being put forward. When it comes to the environment and decisions that we have to take to counter climate change, we have to overcome our differences and we have to build up consensus between the main political forces. This is a subject that is too important for us to be divided internally in the European Parliament or even in national parliaments. Faced with states that are strangely moving backwards on pollution, Europe needs to move forward. Unfortunately, it's been held back by parochialism and partisan decisions in the choice. The Italian presidency will come up with a rapid definition of the future legislative framework on climate and energy. And that is why we have included in Council's roadmap various informal meetings, including that which recently took place at the informal Council meeting in Milan, where we also looked, amongst other subjects, at reforming the emissions trading scheme, ETS, and decided that at the meeting on the 6th of October there'd be a joint meeting between the Energy and Environment Ministers. We are convinced that European policy on climate change has to be seen in connection with energy security. It's impossible to separate these two issues. We also have to be prepared for the COP on climate change in Lima. We will respect the commitments entered into in Warsaw last year and present our contribution to the 2015 Global Agreement. We will commit ourselves to laying the basis in Lima for the negotiating text in the run-up to Paris, which will be a crucial point for reaching global agreements. The Leaders' Summit of Ban Ki-moon in Lima will be an important opportunity for us to make progress on the 2015 agreement for Paris. And I do hope that on that occasion, all of the European countries will be present and will be prepared to make their own contributions. Ladies and gentlemen, the Italian presidency intends on the 28th of October and the 17th of December of this year because there isn't a great deal of time available to us, we hope that we will make significant progress on important subjects by then. And that is why we are going to need very close cooperation with you. This is a sine qua non for us to make progress. In the environmental field, there's the GMOs dossier, which is one of the priorities of the Italian presidency. There have been years when this was blocked in negotiations, but finally there's a political agreement in Council. And what we would like to do is strike a fair balance between maintaining the system of authorizations in the Union and the need for member states to have a certain amount of freedom of movement for limiting or banning GMO production on their territories, so as to respect local and regional specificities. In such a sensitive issue, which affects the whole of society, from farmers to consumers, we have to, in fact, guarantee the sovereignty and the autonomy of the member states. Public opinion in Europe has already sent very clear messages on the production of GMOs, and that is why we feel that it is a political duty for us to make as rapid progress as possible towards an agreement between the Council and the Parliament. Today, the General Affairs Council did formally vote on its common position. Our first desire, therefore, is to be able to work together in order to be able to reach an agreement on the subject of GMOs by the end of the year. Another legislative priority of our presidency has to do with reducing the use of plastic bags. This is a fundamental legislative instrument which will not only lead to a reduction in the total number of plastic bags being currently used, but could also represent an opportunity in terms of improving the entire system of managing waste. We will therefore do everything within our power to reach an agreement where we can significantly reduce their use, partly through keeping in line provisions and examples of good practice that already exist at national level. And I very much hope that Mrs. Auken will get a negotiating mandate in September on this subject, because that will lay the necessary basis for us to reach an agreement by the end of the Italian presidency. On reducing greenhouse gases, the legislative programme of the presidency is based on completing those procedures that are already started. First of all, proposal for a regulation on the monitoring of CO2 emissions in maritime transport. This is one of the priorities of the Italian presidency. The directive on indirect changes in the use of land use, EOLC, is something that we have committed ourselves to greatly. This is a very difficult issue, and the political agreement that was reached in the Energy Council on the 13th of June last reflects the sensitive balance between the positions of the member states. We are aware of the fact that in Parliament too, this is a proposal that had a complex past. We hope that together with Parliament and its rapporteur, Mr. Torvalds, we will be able to reach an agreement with the Parliament and the Council. And then as well, there's the reform of the ETS, which we have to reform and stabilise the ETS system, which represents the principal instrument at community level in combating climate change, with transparent mechanisms that are simple to understand and that are non-discretionary. We are aware of the fact that in technical terms we may not have enough time to enter into full negotiations with Parliament throughout the whole of our presidency, but we hope that we can lay the solid basis to be able to conclude this subject as soon as possible. Finally, I would like to talk about legislative packages on quality of air and waste. These are proposals of fundamental importance in developing a strong environmental policy in the medium and long term. For these reasons, whilst waiting for a position from the European Parliament, we will be attempting to make progress as far as possible within the Council, which has been looking at the proposals in depth. Italy, as it holds the presidency, will coordinate and represent the positions of the Union internationally. And perhaps I can just mention a few of these. There's the Conference of the Parties of the Convention on Biodiversity, and the meetings of the signatory parties to the Nagoya Protocol. And in particular, 12, which will take place in South Korea in October, and which is due to assess progress that's been made on the strategic plan of the convention. That will be the forum to decide on fine-tuning the agreement and ensuring that the Aiki objectives are met, but also for us to contribute to defining sustainable growth objectives worldwide post-2015. The Presidency has committed itself to the European Union playing a clear and constructive role for the success of this and for the full adoption of all decisions taken by the conference. I would like to thank you and conclude by indeed thanking you for having paid attention to what I say. But I am sure that when it comes to subjects that have to do with the environment, which are the subjects that fall within the remit of your committee and within the remit of our council, I'm sure we will be able to cooperate very closely with a constructive spirit and without any partisan feelings. Let me remind you once more, the environment, perhaps more than other subject areas, is something that affects our future, our lives, but in particular the future of our children and future generations. I would wish you success in your work and success to the Council in its work too.
Thank you for that detailed presentation of the priorities of the Italian presidency, and I shall make an immediate start with a first round of questions from coordinators. I would ask the coordinators to confine their contributions to 2 minutes, and then we'll have an initial response from the presidency in office. Peter Liese.
Ja, vielen Dank, Herr Vorsitzender.
Thank you very much. As a EPP coordinator, I'm delighted that this afternoon we've got two ministers here from the presidency, and the Italian government not only consists of Social Democrats, and I'm delighted that you've taken the European Parliament as your top priority, although in Italy there's an important event with the Costa Concordia which falls within your area of responsibility. Let me refer to the 2030 targets that you referred to in your introductory statement. I think it's important that we should ensure that in the October Council this proposal leads the way, and in the EPP, and I talked with my colleagues in the Industry Committee last week about the CO2 40% goal not being called into question in any way. So I would very much encourage you to put your full weight behind the European Council adopting that. Obviously, there have been different views expressed in the European Parliament and in my group as well as to whether we've got 1 or 3 targets, and I think the majority of Parliament, together with the majority of the working group of the EPP, think that it's a good idea to set 3 targets, because after our own impact assessment, it's better for growth and jobs. And you quite rightly mentioned the fact that the growth potential, the potential to create jobs as well within environmental technology is one that we should exploit. And I think an important decision was taken by the European Commission today. 30% energy efficiency is part of that package. And I would ask you to ensure that it is at least that, and you should put your weight behind it and make it clear that it's not conditional, that this is a measure that's got to be implemented. My final sentence is this: we've got more than €1 billion spent on importing fossil fuels daily, and in these days of problems with Russia, perhaps it's something that we need to take into account. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to Matthias Grote without further ado.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think the fact that you wish to have this cultural turnaround of industry, making it more sustainable and more competitive at the same time to generate growth and jobs is a good thing. Many of your colleagues have been here, and every half year there's a new program by the presidency, and we press ahead at TGV speed, but when it actually comes down to it, we're down to the speed of a local shunter service. And I think that when it comes to the Market Stability Reserve, and Ivo Bellet is rapporteur on that, that things do actually get off the blocks pretty quickly, and that we could bring the date forward as to when that's going to come into force, 2021. Well, the warriors in the Commission have won the day. It's far too late, and we're running a risk that this is going to cause serious damage. And I would suggest that we now put this down for 2017 and we get our skates on. As far as the COP conference topic is concerned, we have experienced, all those of us that were part of this time and again, that Europe presents itself, commissioners there, the Parliament sends its delegation as well. We have all these talks, and then Europe falls apart when it comes to announcing the financial wherewithal that is to be granted in 28 different member states. And I think the important thing here is to channel it better under the Italian presidency, and that we get our voice heard more strongly when we're dealing with the financial side of it in Lima. On energy efficiency, I think we have to say it's more than we'd hoped for, but it's far falling short of what the Parliament itself decided in the last legislature, 40%. So 40 minus 30, there's a 10% shortfall. And I think with the energy efficiency target, were we to have stuck with our position, that really would help industry and really would create jobs and growth. And I really hope that you, as the presidency, are now prepared to realise that there's some headroom in that figure, and that it isn't something that is set in stone in the Council, this 30% figure.
Thank you, Matthias, for the ECR. Ian Duncan.
Thank you very much. We are concerned across Europe now with energy security. I'd be very interested in hearing the position of the Minister with regards unconventional hydrocarbon energy and fracking, and whether he feels that will make any significant progress in the next 6 months. Thank you.
Grazie. Adesso...
Thank you. The ALDE Group, Nils Torvalds now.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Galletti, for being here. We are, of course, very happy to have you here, and we sincerely hope that we are going to be as happy in December when we say arrivederci to you. I'm the rapporteur for the ILUC file, and there are rumors or information about the risk of a blocking minority in the Council. Regarding ILUC, could you elaborate on your possibilities or abilities to undo this blocking? Mille grazie.
Grazie. Adesso...
Thank you. Katarina Konečná.
Děkuji, pane předsedo.
Thank you, Chair. Let me welcome you here on behalf of our GUE NGL group. Your job will not be easy. We would like to appeal to you to do one thing. And, Minister, are you listening to me? We would like to suggest that you, as a man whose job is to take care of environment, conduct a immediate consultation about the TTIP agreement, because TTIP agreement is related to environment. I'm sure you understand us. TTIP is about the chemical industry, about food security, about the standards that we built up in Europe. And we think that when the Commission negotiates secretly, it should be up to you, the Council, to open this topic to public and tell us frankly what is your opinion on this agreement and the future negotiations, because the way it is now is completely unacceptable to us. And we are afraid that our environmental and social standards are at risk by the current state of negotiations. Then another thing that you mentioned in your speech is waste legislation. You have mentioned that we are experiencing a waste crisis, which is unacceptable in the longer term. I would like to ask you, what are you going to do about this? Because in Italy, according to my information, there really is a waste crisis. Waste pollutes the subterranean water, and you are not able to prevent it. So what are you going to do in the future? What kind of standards are you going to set to prevent the things that are happening in your own country? Thank you.
Grazie. Adesso la parola.
Thank you. Mr. Eickhout for the Greens.
Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Minister, for your elaborate introduction of the program for the coming months, which promise to be challenging and good months ahead of us, I think. And I think my colleague from ALDE, when he said, I'm also looking forward to say arrivederci, it was in a friendly way meant, of course. Sometimes it can sound maybe a bit awkward otherwise. But we were certainly looking forward to that. One of the biggest priorities, of course, for the Greens is going to be the 2030 climate and energy package, which will be discussed. And rightfully so, in your introduction remarks, you said that this is going to be absolutely key, that Europe needs to be united on this. Well, the Parliament is united and has a very clear position on how we think that the energy package should look like, and that's really a package, meaning that we need 3 binding targets on emission reductions, on renewables, also translated to national targets, and on efficiency. And also today the Commission came out on efficiency with only a 30%, although the Parliament asked for 40%, and the Parliament also asked for binding targets. So we are very much looking forward to the Italian presidency to really push the Council also to work towards a package deal with 3 binding targets, and I would like to hear more from the Minister how he's going to process this debate. Another issue is Lima under your presidency, and there one of the key aspects is going to be the financing. The question is that until now the EU never gets with a financing position, because it's usually always the separate member states who are doing their pledges there every year, which is very unpredictable and also causing a lot of unclarity on where the EU stands with financing. So are you being able for this half year to make sure that the EU goes with Lima with a united standpoint on financing instead of the always very unpredictable positions per member state? Final question on the monitoring, the MRV of shipping. This is going to be one of the few legislative files we're going to be concluded on the Italian presidency, and we hear that within the Council there are some issues on transparency, which would be the minimum from our point of view. So will you be able to get a very clear position of the Council on transparency of shipping MRV in the Council position on this file? Thank you very much.
Grazie. Adesso l'ultimo.
Thank you. The last contribution amongst the coordinators is Nicola Pedicini on behalf of the EFDD group. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman. I also would like to thank the Minister for joining us today and taking the questions we're now putting to him. I'm here to represent a kind of experiment. As you know, since I belong to the EFDD group on behalf of the Five Star Movement, we count a great deal on direct democracy. So my question is one from many European citizens, and not me, who want to ask this question. And I'll sum it up as follows. Given the ambitious climate and energy programme goals, such as reducing CO2 by 30% or cutting fossil fuel energy generation to 27%, since you've talked about choices having to take into account the environmental effect, what is the view of the Italian presidency of the decision taken by the Monti government and adopted by the Leti government to double the amount of hydrocarbons extracted in Italy? In the seas off Croatia. What about the impact of pollution on Italy and Croatia from the drilling of extraction points to take out the energy? This will have an environmental impact. Wouldn't it be more simple to double royalties from the current 7% to 14%, given that the royalties are the lowest in the world now, rather than doubling environmental pollution? Thank you. Thank you. That means we've had now the first round of coordinators, and I'll give the floor back to the Minister for his answers, could I ask him to take 5 minutes insofar as possible, because we have many other colleagues who asked for the floor.
Well, that's a very difficult task. I will try, and I'm sure you will understand if I only have 5 minutes to answer all of those questions that I can't necessarily specifically answer everything. Okay, energy efficiency and the 30% limit, which has been set at the moment by the Commission as a percentage. I think that energy efficiency is something that has a very important impact on the climate energy agreement, which I did say at the beginning of my speech is something that's of strategic importance for the presidency, I think for Council as a whole and for the Parliament too. And that is a subject that is extremely closely linked to the objectives that we have given ourselves in the Italian presidency, namely growth and jobs, because we think that improving energy efficiency will create jobs and will create profits for companies, particularly SMEs, that are those that are suffering the most in Europe. It has an impact on environmental security. If we're efficient in energy terms, we can save energy, and that means that we become more independent in terms of our security of supply. So I think that this is a subject of fundamental importance. As I said earlier, it's the intention of Council to work very hard to achieve a concerted position for the 26th of October that will be shared by the whole of Europe. And I think that that is a signal that we should be sending out to the citizens of Europe for the reasons that I said earlier, but to all the countries in the world, because we can use Lima in December and Paris in 2015 to send that message out. It's a major challenge facing us because not all of the countries of the world see things similarly. There are some countries that are more virtuous, some that are less virtuous, some that are more ambitious, some that are less ambitious. I think that it will be a duty for the European Council to find the most ambitious agreement possible, bringing together all of the countries of the European Union in agreement on ETS. I did say as well in my comments, my opening statement, again, this is closely linked to the climate energy agreement that we need to reach. So it's another component that Council needs to make as much progress upon as possible. We feel that it is absolutely indispensable that we do achieve this because we have to ensure that the ETS market becomes more stable. That will make it more credible, that will make it more efficient and help us to reduce emissions. Having said that, we do hope that when it comes to this subject, the European Parliament will be able to take its debates on this subject forward in the short term too, because that will help us to take this debate further forward. On ILUC, the Council, as you know, has already on this subject reached an agreement. It did this last June. And we are ready to conclude this as soon as possible with the directive, with the help of the European Parliament. We know that this isn't going to be an easy debate. In neither of the institutions did this subject pass through without controversy and debate. Council does have a solid position, which I think represents a good compromise. And as such, I think that here, as I said, there are elements for us to be able to conclude this subject. Then on the agreement with the US, the TTIP, in the presidency, we are negotiating in the Foreign Trade Council. And what are the criteria that are underpinning reciprocity, parallelism, and protection and optimization of European environmental standards, but also social standards and our values and labour standards. These are the values, the objectives and the parameters that we will not cede upon. We will instead be moving forward on that basis and calling for more transparency on waste. Clearly, with this subject too, further progress must be made. We have the Clean Area for Europe package, which we attach a great deal of importance to. Each part of it is very important, including the waste section. And I have to say, I don't want to enter into Italian issues because here I'm representing Council before you, and as such it would seem wrong to forget that. And sometimes we do forget too often that nationally we do have regions that reach high recycling levels, amongst the highest in Europe. So it's not that we suffer more from this problem than others or less. Unfortunately, the whole question of waste is an issue that affects the whole of Europe. And the waste package was adopted by Council only recently, and as such it's very difficult to get this adopted as a priority subject for negotiations with Parliament. Having said that, that doesn't mean that this should not be considered by us as a priority whilst awaiting a position from the European Parliament. Our task will be to make as much progress as possible on the work being done within Council. And that will be a tangible sign of our commitment to waste. The fact that we are actually looking at whether we can discuss a ministerial proposal in October on this subject of waste. Then, maritime transport emissions. We recognise the importance of this subject. Also as a part of the international negotiations on the IMO, and we recognise as well the outcome of the Parliament's vote in first reading, and we are prepared to have constructive debates with the Parliament as soon as possible so to be able to make progress on this subject. Once a rapporteur has been appointed, we will get in contact so as to be able to have discussions and see how quickly we can conclude this subject. Then on the final question that was put,
sensibile, lo voglio affrontare
on hydrocarbon drillings. Well, and this is something that's not just of importance to Italy for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, but in Italy, as in other countries too, we are aware of the results of fracking, and I would just point out objectively that we do have European legislation on this subject, which is amongst the most stringent that exists in Europe. And this, I think, does make it clear just how important we consider this subject to be. And considering that we do think it's an important subject, we obviously will not be neglecting to deal with it at European level either. On shale gas, finally, there isn't a legislative proposal. If you were to wish for us to start discussing this subject and the environmental impacts shale gas can have, particularly on Europe as a whole, Council would not be opposed to that, or rather the Italian presidency would not be opposed.
Thank you for those answers. We've got 23 or 4 colleagues who've asked to take the floor. We'll take 12 colleagues and then take a second round of questions and go on. Ivo Bellet from the EPP is first.
Ricordando sempre 2 minuti.
Please, 2 minutes or less if you can make it.
Grazie, Presidente. I will try to respect your time limit. Minister, hello again, and thanks for being here and being willing to answer our questions. I will be very brief because a lot of questions have already been posed and you have already given excellent answers. It is indeed an important day with the proposal of the European Commission concerning the energy efficiency with the target of 30% that has been put on the table. We all know that, and we all agree that energy efficiency is crucial to diminish our energy dependence, certainly vis-à-vis Russia. 5% more ambition with regard to energy efficiency means 11% less need of imported gas. So we count on you, of course, with regard to the council meeting of mid-October. We count on the Italian presidency to get not just the majority, but all 28 member states behind, to get the support of all 28 member states behind this energy efficiency target. I have one particular question, Minister, regarding CO2 reduction and the ETS, the unique European ETS system, and my colleague Matthias Grotto already referred to the structural reform that we need because we all know that the prices have collapsed and there are no more incentives or almost no incentives anymore for the industry to invest in innovative technologies. So we hope that you agree that that structural reform is needed, that we have to make progress on this dossier, on this proposal of the European Commission in the upcoming months. We are aware of the fact that to finalize it won't be possible, perhaps before the end of the year. Miracles are always possible, but we suppose that it can be finalized in the upcoming presidency. But can you say something more about, and Matthias has already asked it, about the timing of the implementation of that reform, because there are particular member states, and not the tiniest ones that want to front-loaded, if I may use that word, and not talking about 2020, but 2017. Can you say something about the international credits? The system lasts till 2020, but can you say something, and I'm finalizing, President, can you say something about your personal views about the timing, and also about the backloaded allowances that have been agreed upon last year? What will happen with it in the upcoming years? Are you also ready to integrate them into the market stability reserve system? Thanks very much.
Grazie Ivo, e adesso...
Thank you, Ivo. S&D.
Grazie Presidente, grazie Ministro per la presentazione così.
Thank you for that detailed presentation, says Mrs. Kinichi. Thank you for that detailed presidency of the priorities of the Italian presidency programme. Thank you for your willingness to answer our questions. In that connection, I've also got a question that I wanted to put to you. In the revision of Directive 94/62 on packaging, Parliament wants a binding reduction of the use of plastic carrier bags. Can I ask what the presidency is intending to do on this topic? Does the presidency think it can reconcile this with the community objective to reduce the use of plastic bags, taking into account best practice in a number of member states, including Italy? In the presentation, the presidency nodded merely in passing to the new package on waste, and therefore I'd like to ask you again what the presidency thinks about this policy file and whether they can achieve anything by the end of the presidency in council. Thank you. Thank you. ECR. Mrs. Girling.
Mrs.
Girling.
My apologies, Chairman. Too busy talking. I just wanted to ask a very simple question. The Minister very kindly introduced his talk with what his priorities were, and then went on to give us 18 minutes of a resume of the whole sort of agenda for environmental politics in the EU. And I really didn't come out of it actually really understanding particularly technically what he's going to go away from here and ask his officials to really work hard on to prioritise for the next 6 months. So could I ask very simply, could he give us his top 3 priorities that he wants to resolve and where he wants to get to on them by the end of this presidency?
Grazie per...
Thank you. Aldi. Mrs. Rees.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I should be very brief because I can see that the job at hand for the Minister is going to be a pretty arduous one this afternoon. But let me just go back to GMOs on this very sensitive dossier. It's a question of whether Member States can restrict the introduction of GMOs. I've been appointed rapporteur just recently and wish to pick up the baton from Corinne Lepage. It's a topic, as you quite rightly said, Minister, which is very delicate, hypersensitive, in fact, and in some parts of Europe, extremely explosive. There are people who are mobilized on this. Farmers and consumers expect a lot from us. They're placing a lot of hope on us, and so the bar is raised to a very high level. You were saying that the common position has been established, but we haven't officially had it in the European Parliament. As you'll be well aware, the European Parliament has been extremely ambitious for its own sake, with pretty much unanimity, only about 80 votes against, and so we're not going to give up on our lines there, but the initial date was 2011, but it's been stuck in the Council fridge for the last 3 years, as many other things have, and you were being rather optimistic this afternoon about whether this is going to be able to be brought about under your presidency. Well, I'm delighted that we're all trying to move in that direction, but I'd like you to tell us why you think that is going to be the case. What makes you optimistic about that happening? Now, I recognise I've been far too lengthy. Maybe the only other thing I could squeeze in is this. During the electoral campaign, certainly in Belgium, but I think across the board, was food waste. People were always talking about 90 million tons of food are wasted in the European Union every year. I think you said that you're going to be taking steps on that matter as well. I think we need to live up to citizens' indignation on that. I'd like to know what you're planning to do about it.
Thank you, and I'll now give the floor to Mrs. Alken.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, and welcome here, and thank you for your kind mentioning of my report on the plastic bags. I am very grateful, and I hope that you will put all your pressure that we can get a strong legislation. Let me just stress that what I'm proud of in this proposal is that we have a real reduction target. And we got all parties, almost all parties, behind this 50% reduction in 3 years and 80% within 5 years. And that we also, the second point, that we also called for a mandatory pricing system, at least inside the food sector. And these two targets, where I know that Italy, at least in some aspects, has a very progressive legislation, and I really hope that you will support us there, and also that you, in the further work on waste, will work with also the reduction, because I think this plastic bag proposal is the first time we are taking the pyramid, the hierarchy serious, with the reduction as the first thing to do, the prevention, which hasn't been done before. And then let me add on the question on GMOs, because we thought that the GMOs should be handled with your with the next minister, but here to mention that we really hope that you will follow the line of Juncker, saying that it's not acceptable when 2/3 of the people at the member states in the EU is against, that it still can be done. So we want this here to be handled in a way so we have an opt-out system instead of, and I really, yes, call for that support. And then let me finally, going back to the waste, I've been several times in Campania with the Petitions Committee. I've been in Lazio with the Petitions Committee. You're right, you have wonderful areas in Italy where you have a perfect system, and you have very, very bad examples of things going very bad. But I really will count on you to help the Commission. Potocnik was quite strong on it, to also solve the other problems, so Italy could really take the lead on waste management. But there you have to look into Campania also.
Grazie alla collega.
Thank you, Mrs. Alken. Before we take the next question, though, can I ask people to change our programme for 1 second, in that most of Europe is holding a minute of silence for the victims of the flight that went down. So can I ask for a minute of silence, please, commemorating MH17?
Grazie per questo gesto simbolico.
Thank you for that gesture. It was symbolic, but that doesn't mean it wasn't important. It was. So, I'd now like to pass the floor on behalf of the EFDD to Marco Fronta. Thank you very much, Chairman. Minister, coming back to a subject that you did deal with, generally, drilling. Croatia, in the Adriatic, has put 29 lots up for auction for drilling, and we've read in the press that Italy, rather than taking its distances, has been supporting this initiative, although it hasn't made as much progress as Croatia. Now, you said there's very stringent legislation, but I would ask, don't you feel that protection of the environment is very compromised in the Adriatic area, and as such should be more important than any other consideration? And can we still talk about sustainable development when we're talking about drilling for fossil fuels in such a sensitive area? Elisabetta Gardini now has the floor. Thank you. I'll be brief and go directly to the question. First of all, thank you, though. I wanted to come back to what was said about the Lima conference, because since Copenhagen, I've been following what the COPs have been developing, and over the last few years, we've seen that there have been blockages that have been unblocked at the last minute. And in the run-up to Paris, what are you planning then to ensure that we do make progress? Because as you quite rightly said, we are aware of the fact that we've had this crisis, but we do have to change the way in which we see things, and where environment and climate change is seen as an obstacle to competition rather than a contributing factor. So perhaps you could go into more details. Then another point. You mentioned the informal meeting in Milan, bringing together ministers of the environment and employment ministers. What is the presidency planning to do about this circular economy? Thank you, Mrs. Gardini. Vice President Pock has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Pane ministře, to bude velmi jednoduchá.
Minister, I have one very simple question. Endocrinal disruptors. They have gotten to the background of the agenda. The European Commission does not provide the answers that the Parliament requires. And I would like to know if your presidency, which has been rather vague about this item so far, is going to do something about this problem.
Grazie, Vicepresidente.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Kitkanen has the floor.
First of all, I would like to congratulate you, Mr. Minister, because I think that you had very elaborated and to the point speech about the green economy, about the fact that this is not a fight between the industry and the environment, not even a fight between different fields of industries. It is a crucial and vital point to create jobs, new income, competitiveness, and well-being for the Europeans and on our industries. And so quite much it's a battle between the companies within one industry. and our difficult task is to help the SWIFT. And I think that you pointed out this very, very nicely and clearly. And concerning about that, I would like to come back to the circular economy and the proposals of the resource efficiency that a couple of my colleagues have been asking you already, and maybe it was on the translation or I didn't listen to you very carefully, but I would like to come back on three issues. Firstly, this is the energy efficiency. Are you in favour for the 40% binding targets? And how do you see that you could work as the lead of the council to have this, and secondly, to have that reflected on the energy efficiency directive? Secondly, and that comes to the targets of the circular economy, do you think that you can work to get the binding resource efficiency indicators on European semester? And then, while we know that the market stability reserve has the gap of 3 years, so would, as some of my colleagues asked already, would you like to confirm that you would work for the point that this gap wouldn't exist, so that we could have the system starting already in 2017. Thank you very much for your efforts.
Thank you very much. Our colleague Mr. Favier on behalf of the Liberals.
Dear Minister, as it has been said before, in its position on a new EU energy and climate policy for 2030, the European Parliament voted in favour of ambitious goals of a 40% reduction in CO2 emissions, a 30% share of renewable energy, and a 40% improvement in energy efficiency. Given the fact that I'm the rapporteur for the CO2 emission reduction in maritime transport dossier, and considering your introduction, you spoke largely on sustainable growth, and also not forgetting that, or taking into account the strong political signal given by the European Parliament to strengthen the Commission lack of ambition, can you please tell us if the Italian presidency will push the Council towards giving due consideration to the European Parliament position? Thank you. Grazie.
Thank you. Now, on behalf of the Greens, Mr. Taylor. Mr. Taylor.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for your presentation. I was thinking about growth, and one of the growths that we don't want to see, that we have seen, is a growth in the deaths of European citizens from air pollution. According to a Commission study, a shocking 420,000 people across the EU die every year due to the effects of air pollution. Obviously, I hope you share my revulsion in this and find it completely unacceptable. I would like to know what the Italian presidency will do to ensure ambitions are increased in relation to the National Emissions Ceilings Directive, and whether or not you would be in support of a 2025 binding target for compliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Now, on the EPP, Mr. Nagy.
Thank you, dear President. Dear Minister, thank you for concluding in person the priorities of the Italian presidency, and I'm also glad that the support for the environmental friendly economy has been pointed out by you. Moreover, I'd like to point out the importance of the support of environmentally friendly consumption patterns. And policy should also emphasize the promotion of job creation in setting the targets for environment protection. Our climate policies and within that, energy policy, unfortunately generated investments which did not create sustainable jobs. What's more, sometimes they closed down companies due to CO2 policies, especially in new member states in Eastern Europe. These are victims and sacrifices and have not been compensated due to the loss of values of the quotas. Without a global agreement, these losses and sacrifices have not brought about any improvements. Do we know how much capacities have been replaced by import, or how much capacities have been sourced out, moved out from the EU due to the carbon leakage? I'm certain that due to if we do not change these policies, they would not be sustainable. I think we should lay much more emphasis, instead of emission trading, to the more efficient use of natural resources. By increasing energy efficiency and by recycling secondary raw materials, we could find ways to create new jobs and sustainable jobs to that. A second question, Minister, if you allow, I'd like to ask your opinion about shale gas. How should we promote shale gas to ensure independence in energy?
Dare la parola al Ministro per questo primo.
Thank you very much. I'll pass the floor to the Minister after this, but Mr. Butala first.
I'm sorry, I was listening to the Swedish, so I didn't hear you. Herr ordförande, herr minister, det har varit intressant att lyssna på dig.
Thank you very much, Minister. I thought what you said was extremely interesting, and I was very happy when I heard you speak about emissions from maritime transport. I'm shadow rapporteur on that subject, and I will be keeping a very close eye on what you'll be doing. You also mentioned Lima and said that it was important for the Italian presidency to make progress on this front, but I would also like to be able to say to my voters in Sweden when I go back home that the Italians are making a genuine effort to ensure that Europe is at the cutting edge of climate change, so that we really are in a strong position at the next summit. So let me ask a question. How are you going to ensure that binding objectives are set? What level of ambition are you going to be plumping for? What priorities will you present on behalf of the European Union so as to ensure that the summit comes out with as harsh a position as possible? Thank you very much to all colleagues who've asked questions. Minister, I'd like to pass you the floor. I'll give you maybe 7-8 minutes to answer this time round. I think really I'd need about 4 hours to do this properly, but I'll accept the challenge of 7 or 8 minutes. Comments off mic.
Permettetemi di dire.
Let me say one thing as a premise. I am extremely happy because there seems to be a general convergence on the subject that I said in my initial comments was our main priority, namely a cultural shift, changing our approach and seeing the environment not as an impediment but as something that should be mainstreamed, seeing the environment not as the problem anymore but as the solution for problems in other sectors. This is a paradigm shift. And the fact that there was such a welcome for that approach does make me think that Council on the one hand and Presidency on the other can work along these concepts over the next few months. Now, how can we translate these concepts into action on the ground? Because if we don't take that step, we have fine words but nothing being done. Many of the subjects that have been raised today by me or your questions really do have to do with this paradigm shift in approach. And when we're talking about the circular economy, or the efficient use of resources, what we're actually talking about is changing the structure of the economy, and that's a milestone, putting it at the service of the environment. So I will run my economy, and we will have our economic system, of course, and company owners will make profits. It's their right to do so. We're not against that in the slightest form. But if company owners respect the environment and if they commit to the circular economy, they should do that because they see that as maximizing their profits, and also for ensuring that in fact means they'll be using products and raw materials that at the end of their life circle or during the productive cycle they produce waste which can be used in other productive cycles or processes, or they lead to the production of a good which again can be recyclable rather than thrown away. Now, why do I say that's a change? Because it will change the way in which we do business. We will move from a linear economy to a circular economy. Why would that create jobs? Well, if you look at the new professions and the impact on those, eco-design would become the heart of a new productive system. So that would be new jobs, new professions, creating new jobs. And the same really goes and is equally important when looking at climate and energy and the agreement that we're trying to achieve there. As I said earlier, if we're to be ambitious in our objectives, then we do need to improve our energy efficiency, which will create jobs as well as respecting the environment. In the renewables sector, in Italy, we have a very high target for renewables, and that's created a huge number of jobs. And I know the same thing has happened in your countries too. So you can see this is a whole process that is moving forward and that we will be supporting. But we also have to be aware of the fact that we need this cultural paradigm shift. Answering questions, some of them I think that I have already answered. If I don't give exhaustive answers, it's not being done deliberately, it's because I don't think I can necessarily answer better than I already have. ETS, I did already say, as far as we're concerned, this is a priority area. And on the timing, I think that more than one country actually wants to bring the time frame forward. That's an important point, and we're working upon it. On the international part, the credits, I think that this needs to be assessed as a part of the whole of the reform. We are open to possible restrictions on use. We don't want to discourage investors or penalise any investments that may have been made up until now. Having said that, on this subject, and this is valid for the ETS, but also for any questions on the climate energy package as a whole, I think that we have to strike a proper balance, and that's something we will be trying to do over the next few months through negotiations, because there are countries in Europe that are more ambitious, there are countries that are less ambitious, and quite clearly, as quite often happens within the European Union, we're going to have to try and strike a balance. I always bear in mind the fact that trying to achieve perfection can get in the way of what is actually achievable. The best is the enemy of the good. And when trying to strike a balance between 28 countries, you have to bear that in mind. I've said I'll do my best and try and achieve the best result. Maybe at the end of the day, Council will only achieve something that is good, not the best in all best possible worlds, because it will be trying to strike a balance between 28 countries. But we will try and do that, and before the Lima conference, we will be working on that. We have already been working on that. And did as well before Milan. On plastic bags. This is something that is particularly close to our hearts. Let me stress one point. We want to make progress on plastic bags because we are aware of the fact that this is an environmental problem, not any other kind of problem. Plastic bags pollute. They pollute our seas. So, when approaching this subject, we are particularly concerned by the environmental component. We want to make progress. We want an agreement between all of the countries. We know that the European Parliament wants targets. The Commission and many countries in Council, though, don't want those targets. I think it would already be a success were we to get to the end of this 6-month period with the decision that each country internally would have decided to reduce the use of plastic bags. And in some cases, in Italy and in Ireland, for example, what we have seen is the gradual phasing out of plastic bags use. And we're also hoping that in December we will already have made progress on this subject, amongst others. I was asked what my 3 main priorities or top targets are. Let me try and summarise them briefly. The agreement in October. The agreement in October on the climate energy package for 2030. I want that to be an ambitious agreement, as I said earlier, and I would repeat that. And there's no doubt that that is a priority. At the beginning, I said something that I thought was important, and that was new governance of the European Union, which sees the environment as being an integral part of the way in which the European semester is managed. I think this would be a major victory for Council, but also for the Parliament, and in particular for this committee, were that to be the case. I also identified some particular dossiers, GMOs, plastic bags, and ILUC, indirect land use change. And I think that with your assistance, we will be able to make significant steps forward in these subject areas. On GMOs. On GMOs, on the 12th of June, the Commission reached an agreement. I said that at the beginning. Our attention is to work on the basis of that so as to be able to reach an agreement ourselves by the end of the Italian presidency. On endocrine disruptors, there's no doubt that this is a subject of fundamental importance. It's important for us and it's important for my health colleague who will be speaking after me. We are awaiting the Commission's proposal on this, and when we get it, we will immediately roll up our sleeves and get to work on it. Efficient use of resources now. Targets. We've had in-depth discussions on this in Milan, and I do believe that this should be a political objective. If politics moves on this subject, then we could in fact have targets decided upon. Again, though, for all the countries to agree to that will take a great deal of work, but that's what we will be trying to achieve. And I think it would be excellent were we to be able to reach agreement at the October Council. I don't think I have any other subjects down here. I do apologise if I've left anything out. It wasn't deliberate.
I understand the questions are coming thick and fast, and it's not so straightforward to give quick, detailed answers. I'll begin a further round of questions. I'll begin with the EPP, namely a colleague Delaya, who is asked to put her question.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister, for that exchange of views. I shall be very brief. It's a question, after all, that has already been mentioned by one of our colleagues on GMOs. Now, I'd like to put the emphasis on the circular economy and sustainable food, food waste, etc. You would appear to want to commit yourselves to that. I just wonder what your thinking is. What exactly are you going to pursue on this, particularly for use-by dates and when it comes to fruit and vegetables that have visible imperfections? Then what about European action to collect products from farmers that cannot be put onto the ordinary market, maybe through associations or charities? And finally, price transparency. What actions do you intend to pursue in this area, particularly with regard to imports of low-cost products? I'm thinking here of fruit and vegetables. You've also got to think about what impact this has on farm incomes and also the quality of the products, particularly the ones that remain unsold, grown here.
Socialista, il collega Leinen.
Mr. Leinen, Socialist Group.
Herr Minister, Sie waren ja auch Mitglied der
Minister, you were part of the European Platform for Resource Efficiency, and we did good work there, and we noted that we have we're using too much material, we're wasting a lot. I think you would agree with that. I would encourage you to set a target. I think you were saying that yourself. When it comes to climate and resource protection, we need a timetable and we need a tangible target, otherwise you can't measure your success. So what are you thinking on that? Secondly, very briefly, the Green Climate Fund coffers are empty, and of course member states are hoping that EU will put money in. Is Italy thinking of arranging for new monies to flow? Germany promised 750 million at the Berlin summit, and maybe Italy is going to lead the way as well.
Grazie.
Thank you. This is Yatomaki. I can't see her, so I'll move on straight away to the Greens. Davoslik.
Zahvaljujem gospodine predsjedniče. Jedno pitanje uvaženom gospodinu ministru.
I have a question to the minister. The cross-border pollution convention, given that we've got cross-border air pollution, this impacts on the environment, and I'd like to say in that regard that for a number of years now, Croatian citizens are having pollution from refineries in Bosnia-Herzegovina. This is a refinery owned by the Russians, and modernization of it is continually postponed. Also in Bosnia-Herzegovina, they're planning to bring on stream some new coal-fired power stations, and in so doing, they are disregarding Croatian views. Bosnia-Herzegovina has not ratified a binding agreement, and I wonder if you would say what the Council and you as the Presidency in office have to say about this issue between a member of the EU and a country that's not currently a member of the EU.
Thank you. Paolucci, please. No, not present. Caputo.
Grazie Presidente, illustre Ministro.
Thank you, Chairman, Minister. I'll keep it very brief. I have a specific question. I come from an area you'll be well familiar with in Campania, Terra del Fuochi. I would like to say something about the 218 plus illegal fly tips and the various problems that we have here, and wonder what the Italian presidency will be doing in this 6-month presidency to draw up a strategy for action to reclaim these sites in a way which will resolve this problem, which has now become a tremendous one in our region, and I think it's spread beyond the borders of our country now.
Grazie. Gli altri colleghi.
Thank you. The other colleagues who've asked the floor are not with us in the room, so I'll hand over straight away to the Minister to try and answer, and then we'll move on to the next Minister.
Grazie mille.
Thank you very much. Efficient use of resources. The question of food waste is strictly and closely linked to the efficient use of resources. I was really quite struck because in Italy we carried out a research project into this subject, and 2/3 of Italian subjects didn't link resource waste with environmental issues. They linked it to economic problems, but not at all to the environment. So I think that is a cultural challenge facing us, making it clear to people that when we throw away a piece of bread, it's like we're throwing away natural resources, a bit of the environment, some water. So a great deal of attention needs to be paid to that, and in your committee too. So we will be organising a high-level meeting on the 24th of November as a part of the European semester, which will be focusing specifically on this subject. I think it's worth going into greater depth on this subject, and I'm also sure that one of the measures that we're going to have to institute to combat this problem facing us is actually ensuring that we have more of a feeling of our environmental culture, and that perhaps is something that we need to put more effort into than we have so far. If the next generation is not made up of people who have had a lot of their education concentrating the importance of respect for the environment, we'll never solve this problem. Really, respect for the environment being taught to our children is one of the easiest ways of ensuring that the environment will be respected. Then, on green food, all I can do is repeat that we are strongly committed to cooperation with developing countries when it comes to bilateral projects, but also multilateral projects. And we will continue to work on this as we have always done. On GMOs, before I didn't perhaps fully answer, and perhaps I can come back to this for a second. Let me underline that over the next few days we will be working together with the Parliament to try and come up with a common position. And I am convinced that we will be able to work very fruitfully with Mrs. Rees, who is the rapporteur on this provision, and be able to find an immediate solution. Then on the other problems, the Terra di Fuoco, yes, well, on Monday morning I will actually be there to discuss landfills with the local ministers. And as I said at the beginning, I didn't really want to talk about local issues whilst wearing the hat of the Italian presidency. Thank you very much, though, for all of the questions and comments. I hope that over the next 6 months we'll have a very fruitful relationship, and not just over the next 6 months, because I think we're going to have a long and tiring path ahead of us, both us and you, but that's something that hopefully will satisfy the expectations not just of us, but also our children.
Thank you also to the Minister for his availability and accepting this bombardment of questions which he's tried to answer. I'll call a 5-minute break to accompany the Minister out and receive the Health Minister, Mrs. Lorenzin, with us before we resume.
Cari colleghi, colleghi, se prendiamo posto.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you wouldn't mind taking your seats, please. And then we can start with our second hearing of this afternoon.
Bene, possiamo cominciare.
Excellent. Perhaps we can move on to our second hearing this afternoon then. And I would like to thank the Minister for Health from Italy, my friend Beatrice Lorenzin, for having agreed to meet with our committee this afternoon. We've already met with Minister Galletti, and colleagues put a substantial number of questions to him. And now it's your turn to go through a baptism of fire. I'd like to give you roughly 10 minutes to explain the priorities of the Italian presidency, and then we'll have 2 rounds of questions. The first round will be the political group coordinators responsible for this subject for the groups, and then we will have questions from other committee members. So I'll pass the floor to you immediately to get to the crux of this issue and the Italian presidency's priorities.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chairman, it's a great pleasure for me as the Health Minister who will be heading up the Health Council in the European Union over the 6 months to come to you and speak to you in this assembly, which is so important in the life of the Union, to talk to you about the Italian presidency programme. I'll try, and in these few months left ahead of us, to make every effort to come up with an innovative programme taking us through the next 5 years. I would recall that we're opening a new trio presidency together with Latvia and Luxembourg, which will follow us over the next 18 months. And together with the colleagues from those 2 countries, we've agreed a shared programme, and the awareness that the EU's activities are a continuum has helped us here, and this should carry us through the handover from one country to the next. Our presidency aims to design a new, fully agreed EU vision geared up to growth, competitiveness, innovation, and one which is more integrated and closer to citizens, and part of the Europe 2020 strategy. Our programme is an attempt to tackle all the fundamental sectors as far as healthcare systems are concerned, from programming, prevention and promotion of healthy lifestyles onwards, looking also at therapies and animal health and welfare. As far as legislation is concerned, we have inherited from the Greek presidency medical devices and in vitro diagnostics, which have been under discussion for a long time now. The Italian presidency intends to advance on both topics based on a constructive discussion involving, of course, the European Parliament, with an attempt to come up with as broadly as shared a compromise as possible in Council. The aim is to create a more efficient and effective system which will simultaneously allow further development by the EU industry in this area, which is the world leader in some of these fields. In Rome, on the 18th and 19th of December, there will be the annual conference on medical devices. In terms of food safety, however, the presidency sets the greatest store by 2 proposals for regulations currently being examined by the European Council and Parliament. Firstly, the revision of the rules on inspections and other official checks on foods and animal feeds will take into account the needs for official standards to be upheld in animal health and food in the whole agri-food industry, and will also ensure that we have the internal market working properly with equal treatment for all participants in the economy. The presidency takes a positive view of many of the proposed text put forward by the NV committee, seeing them as improvements, both speaking technically and politically. Therefore, we believe it is necessary, as soon as possible, to start work with the European Parliament with a view to an early second reading procedure. A further priority for us is fighting fraud. And that comes not least in light of the European Parliament's proposal for a resolution on the food crisis, fraud in the food chain and related checks, which was adopted in December 2013. In that connection, working together with the European Commission on the 23rd and 4th of October in Rome, will hold an international conference on food fraud in order to define the strategy to adopt and assess the emerging problems in this area. The final aim is to draft a joint agreed guidance document to submit to the European Council. Just as important is the proposal on novel foods. This is aimed at revising current European legislation by streamlining and harmonising the current authorisation procedures, not least in light of the latest developments in EU law. Checks on conformity with rules throughout the whole agri-food chain is fundamental and inescapable. We need healthy, safe food available in adequate quantity and quality. That's vital for human life. The Presidency therefore gives a positive appraisal to adopting a centralised authorisation procedure with safety assessments entrusted directly to EFSA. Our aim is to achieve an agreement on both pieces of legislation, whilst being aware of the differences of view between member states within Council. The Italian presidency intends to highlight the importance of vaccinations in public health strategies and to examine prospects for new vaccines, to assess their risks and to encourage the rollout of vaccination plans in the different member states. Amongst the topics that will be subject to Council conclusions, we've already begun discussions on a text on vaccinations. These are the preeminent way of dealing with very many communicable diseases, and they are directly beneficial to those who are vaccinated, and there's also the cohort effect which protects unvaccinated subjects. In September we intend to present proposals for conclusions on the safety of therapies and the prevention of related infections. This is an issue which has long attracted the attention of Member States and the Commission. A third topic, which will need to be the basis of proposed conclusions, is patient-centred therapeutic innovation. Now, what we mean by this is innovation both in pharmaceutical products and medical devices, and also we take on board personalised medicines whilst also looking at cost efficiency of pharmaceutical products. The great cost of innovative drugs, such as those used to treat chronic hepatitis, are a growing concern for all public health authorities. We've had an opportunity to look at this matter in greater depth in the Council on the 20th of June and at a technical level, and this will be the centre of the informal ministerial on the 22nd and 3rd of September, and depending on the outcome of the discussions it will feed into proposed conclusions. Following up from the guidance given by the last two health councils, we were asked to ensure that we were more representative of healthcare in our presidency, and therefore we've been working more closely with the Social Protection Committee with a view to a joint evaluation of the annual growth survey, and we're working on country-specific recommendations in that connection, setting out a route forward for future presidencies. And in the last council we'll look at the link between the economy and health. It's emerged very clearly from all member states how important that is. We need to look at health as a cross-cutting issue and not a cost. It's rather an investment in our societies. On the quality and performance of healthcare systems, we support the efforts made to identify indicators that may aid member states in making comparable performance assessments. Other topics that we deal with, important topics, will be dealt with at the informal ministerial, such as dealing with preventing tumours through promoting healthy lifestyles. This is very important for public health, given that tumours, alongside cardiovascular disease, are the foremost cause of mortality in the EU. A third topic, very close to the heart of the Italian presidency, is pain treatment and palliative therapy within the broader context of making therapy more humane. In the meeting of chief medical officers, a number of topics of interest to the presidency will be tackled, such as the management of diabetic patients, managing chronic respiratory diseases, and genomics in public health. As far as events are concerned, the first ministerial conference of the presidency on the 2nd and 3rd of October in Rome will be devoted to women's health, and we will use a life course approach. This is a topic I'm particularly keen on. I really think we need to look at perspicacious attempts to promote healthcare, looking at gender-related diseases, and we need to look at the quality of fertility, the management of childbirth and later life stages, and there needs to be attention paid to pathologies experienced more by women than men. This is also an opportunity to compare and contrast views between member states on women's health throughout the various stages of life. The four topics we've chosen are lifestyles, looking at food and physical activity, sexual health, looking at sexually transmitted diseases, reproductive health, looking at pre-conceptional health, also in pregnancy and post-childbirth, and also screening for women's diseases with a view of promoting health, and also looking at fertility amongst oncological patients. Another issue particularly of concern is digital health. The presidency on the 7th and 8th of October will be organising a conference on that in Rome, so you've got every opportunity to come to Rome, and we are looking at the approaches taken by various member states on e-health, particularly with a view to the electronic health file and telemedicine. On the 27th and 8th of October in Rome, there'll be a ministerial conference on healthcare in the Mediterranean. The presidency sees the Mediterranean as an opportunity to promote integration and cohesion in order to have a prosperous and healthy region. To that effect, this conference is an opportunity to define an agreed strategy with European colleagues on promoting health in that region. The development of cooperation projects geared up to health policies in the Mediterranean region is a way of promoting social and economic growth, and will promote stability and peacemaking in that region at a time of profound social, cultural and economic change. And above and beyond that, it's also vital in terms of public health. On the 3rd of November, we will be holding a conference on quality, security and costs of care, a fundamental theme of our presidency. As I've said, we'll already be setting aside a specific initiative on that. The conference aims to tackle this issue by linking clinical and organisational efficiency on the one hand with economic efficiency on the other. This is a priority requirement for all healthcare systems and is fundamental if we're to link sustainability and quality of therapeutical care. Dementia is another important issue. On the 14th of November in Rome, we will hold the technical conference on this issue. Dementia is important in an ageing European society. It's a significant cause of invalidity and the fourth biggest cause of death amongst the 65 plus. This event is a useful opportunity to compare and contrast views on the strategies adopted in Italy and Europe on dementia. It's an opportunity also to look at how we can roll out research, prevention and therapeutic interventions, and more generally to look at promoting healthcare amongst senior citizens. The presidency also pays great attention to the conference on HIV and AIDS in 20 years on from the Dublin conference, and we'll be holding that on the World HIV Day in Rome. HIV and AIDS has benefited from major progress thanks to research and development in recent years, and HIV sufferers are now enjoying similar health to the ordinary population now. All this is happening thanks to new pharmaceutical products and new strategies on their use and the prevention of infectious diseases. We intend to look in detail at these issues involving charities and NGOs, which are well represented at EU and international level. 10 years on from the Dublin Declaration, it's time for a new commitment to fighting this serious disease now. On the 4th and 5th of December, there'll be a conference organised as part of the joint action for healthcare professionals to focus attention on the need to plan these healthcare professions properly and to exchange and contrast views there. On the 16th to the 18th of October in Venice, we'll be looking at healthcare for the young people. As you know, young people make up 27% of world population, and 65 plus percent of mental health is suffered by young people. And mental health is something that is present through childhood, adolescence and adult life, and that's why we need to look in particular at mental health care provided to young people, young adults. Another issue for the presidency is resistance to antimicrobial resistance, and we'll be holding a conference on that as part of the One Health action, which involves human and veterinary professionals, but also the food sector, and we'll be paying particular attention to this because it's so important for public health, and that will be something that we begin with the regional committee of the WHO in our presidency. Lastly, I'd like to say that the Italian presidency is going to be particularly careful in its relationship with this Parliament as a co-legislator, taking a decision on strategic choices which will be beneficial to all 500 million EU citizens. And so this is a new Parliament, largely new members here, and this is an opportunity to outline important strategies on health for the next 5 years. I am very keen to establish a cooperative relationship with the Parliament and with this committee in order to embark on work which will be useful to all our citizens. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Minister.
E adesso partiamo con il giro.
And now perhaps we can hear from the coordinators. Speaking on behalf of the groups, Mr. Petela on behalf of the EPP.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Madam Minister, dear colleagues, congratulations. You have done a lot in your 10 minutes, and it's good to see you here for the second term as a Minister of Health. I'm glad to see that the Italian presidency is promoting health and prevention, and especially a healthy lifestyle. I hope that the presiding trio will come up with a conceptual continuity. Every Ministry of Health should have a department to promote a healthy lifestyle, in my opinion. In general, the health trends are worrying in Europe. Cancer and diabetes are surging. This means that preventive and curative treatments need to be strengthened. Promoting health is always included in our resolutions, white papers and so on. However, the number of patients still increases. My question is the following. What is needed, in your opinion, in order to combine the community and mental method to come up with something efficient in this area so that the European citizens will feel the effects? What to do to provide added value at the EU level? Because we often hear that the health is in the competence of member states and then nothing happens. I am sure that without changing the treaty, we can do more for health. We need a visible promoter of health. We need someone who will step up and speak in favor of prevention at the Commission level. Would you support the commitment to increase the share from 3 to 5% in terms of prevention? Minister Galletti, your colleague said that the environment should be integrated in the European semester. That was a good idea, but I think the European semester should also include health, because this is a very important area. I've already written a message to Commissioner Juncker. Thank you.
E ora per l'SD.
Thank you. Now on behalf of the Socialists, Mr. Grote.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your presentation. You've got a lot of work ahead of you, a lot of conference announced, and I think it's good that degenerative diseases and dementia are going to be having conferences devoted to them. So my question is, to what extent is there a strategy behind this? Because these diseases are ever more frequent because our societies are getting older, and it's good that the ball is being picked up in this conference, but how does it fit in with the general strategy? Medical devices. When can we have the Council's common position? When can we start, as Parliament, our work on the second reading? Maybe you'd be able to say a few words about that. Next, antibiotic resistance. The number of new infections is going up massively in the European Union, and I wonder what you intend to do in the remaining, well, it's only 4.5 months, isn't it, that's left of your presidency. What are you planning? Last but not least, TTIP. Clinical trials and standards. When it comes to authorizations, is there going to be a watering down? What is your strategy? Will the health ministers be grappling with that and our health system's approaches to the authorization of medicines and the implications for TTIP? Because our great concern is that in the main negotiators conference that we were able to follow, we ensure that the important thing is our standards shouldn't get reduced and other standards brought in. We've got excellent standards in the European Union, and I think it goes without saying that it wouldn't be a good thing if we got other standards brought in, or in the worst case, ours were to be reduced. So the health ministers during the Italian presidency, to what degree are these matters going to be discussed by them?
ECR, la collega Girling.
Mrs. Gerling for the ECR.
Thank you, Chairman. My question follows on to some extent from Mr. Peterle's. He spoke about the increasing problems of diseases such as cancer, and in a sense, what I want to talk about is, to some extent, prevention of that, but the issue around people's general health and the issues around health claims, which we have spoken about in the last Parliament many, many times, and whether the system is right, whether we've got the evaluation of substances right, whether we've got the balance between evaluation and consumer protection right. And I think the general position is that probably no, we haven't. And I know that this is a huge concern in Italy because of the number of Italian colleagues that I've worked with on this and the number of letters and concerns coming from Italy particularly. So what I wanted to ask you was, we already know that in theory, although the Commission obviously have to confirm this, the new Commission will have to confirm this, in theory we will be having a review of the health claims regulation starting early in 2015. So I was wondering if you had any plans as the Presidency to do some groundwork towards that, possibly a conference, a little bit of public relations work on that as the groundwork for that review, because I think that's going to be hugely, hugely important and interesting to our consumers.
Grazie. Adesso per il...
Thank you. On behalf of the Liberals, Mrs. Ries.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Minister, for that very comprehensive presentation. I'd like to come back to one of the two questions I put to Minister Galletti earlier. He replied on the first but forgot the second. GMOs. And we'll be able to come back to them on other occasions as well. But I think the important thing here, and this is something that came up during the electoral campaign, food waste. I wonder, what about this 90 million tons of food that are wasted every year in the European Union? Do you think, by modifying some of our legislation on labelling or working with national authorities, we'll be able to get something moving? What about use-by dates on food? Maybe you could say a few words about living up to the expectations that our citizens urgently require of us. I'd also like just to come back to that important matter you were mentioning in your timetable, dementia. Obviously, Alzheimer is a particular component there. And under the French presidency back in 2008, we did a lot of work on that because it was one of the priorities of that presidency and led to the Alcove program, I think, which finished in 2013. A lot of work gone into that, and particularly with associations, and I think we must thank them. They have always been there, and we owe them answers. I think Mr. Choruta said that we have to move from words to deeds. We need a strategy behind this. We need a new program. They need a new program. We all need a new program, and need to make progress on that question. I'm at 2:22. Okay, to sum up, just in one word, obesity. It's no longer on the agenda. It's one of the scourges of this new century, with a whole series of different diseases related to it. It costs between 5 and 10% of all health budgets of each of our member states, and nutrition is on your programme in so many words. How are you going to tackle this urgent issue of obesity? It's not just a cosmetic matter. It's affecting more and more Europeans, particularly young people.
Grazie.
Thank you. Our colleague Forenza on behalf of the GUI.
Sì, buongiorno.
Thank you. Yes, good afternoon, Minister. I have a couple of questions I'd like to put. Firstly, a subject already raised in earlier comments, negotiations on TTIP, TTIP. As a parliamentary group, we have already made clear that we are opposed to this and have serious concerns about these negotiations, and in particular, I feel the Italian government should give its position on the risks that are inherent in this when it comes to animal health, more specifically. As an Italian member, I heard Sotto Secretary Gorzi describing TTIP as a major opportunity for Italy. But the risks, GMOs to animal health, I think are particularly pertinent. So perhaps I can ask your opinion as Minister and as a representative of the Italian presidency. Then women's health and the costs of women's health. It seems to me, actually, that this is an issue that is lacking from the programme, that there is a right that's under attack in Italy and across Europe, and that is the right to a completely safe abortion. In Italian hospitals, we have conscientious objectors, and their presence is more protected than women's right to have a safe abortion. Now, as the representative of the Italian presidency, are you planning to act on this? Final question. The possibility of acting to protect health in the workplace. Sometimes the right to health and the right to work contradict each other. And I'd like to know whether the Italian presidency is planning to act on this issue and try and ensure that we can reconcile these two rights, particularly when we're seeing swinging cuts to the health budget in order to respect the treaties. Thank you. Mrs. Auken for the Greens.
Mr. Chair, and welcome here in the committee. We will look forward to a strong and committed Italian chairmanship, and also with a strong focus on health and a clean, untoxic environment. I will take the same question as also did Mr. Grote on the the medical devices, where we are looking forward to see you are active on this here. And here I will mention two things. I'm not going into the scrutiny issue, because there it might be known we want a free market approval. But I will ask you if you will secure that the results from the clinical investigation will be made public, available, in line with we know now from the clinical trials on pharmaceutical. Because, you know, if we have a full transparency here, and we can make sure that it's not possible to cheat us, then we are in a much safer position. So I really want to save this. I've just mentioned also to link it to the TTIP thing before, that we know that the clinical trial regulation, as we just passed just before the elections, was one of the things that Big Pharma was focusing on from the US. They want to get rid of all this transparency and openness. And there I really hope we will have a strong partner in you. And then I will take another point which is very important for us, also related to clinical trial, to medical devices, and that is these devices are, as you of course know, in direct contact with the human body, and they should contain no toxic substances unless they cannot be substituted. And here we want especially you to focus on carcinogenics, on mutagenics, or toxic to reproduction health. There, you know, that should be much more focused on that it has been up till now. We know how dangerous these things are to development of human health, and therefore our question will be, can you make sure that also this carcinogenics, toxic, the mutagen substances will be not only investigated but also avoided in the future to the high-risk medical devices? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Alken. Mr. Pedicini for the FDD.
Allora, Ministro, io...
Thank you, Chair. Minister, as for Minister Galletti, I would reiterate my question, which isn't so much mine as the question put forward by some citizens I represent here. This is a direct democracy experiment. This question may seem local, but it isn't actually. And I'm sure you'll understand that. I come from Terra di Fughi, which has been mentioned, and I went to, in fact, live in an area where oil is extracted, and I have been working in the field of cancer oncology for 20 years now, so have a certain experience, and I can understand that we don't want our experiences to act as a precedent for other member states. Considering the critical environmental situation in certain areas near Taranto, in Campania, in Basilicata, in Sardinia, in Brescia, areas where we have cement plants, where we have coal-fired plants. Now, the European Commission recently opened infraction procedures against Italy because it couldn't guarantee that water for human consumption met European standards and values, particularly in terms of fluorine and arsenic pollution and contamination. So, what actions does the Italian presidency plan to institute to reduce the incidence of tumours? And what you suggested, promoting healthy lifestyles, I would say is not really ambitious enough. We need to address the root causes causing these tumours. And what other provisions will the Italian presidency develop to ensure we have 100% coverage nationally and European level to have a register of tumours? Because unfortunately, we have huge gaps in our knowledge. And for the Italian presidency, what are you planning to do to ensure that the polluter pays principle is actually applied in Italy specifically and across Europe more generally? Thank you, and thank you, colleagues, for those questions. I'd now like to pass the floor back to the Minister, who has been scribbling away like a mad thing. So how will she manage to fill, 7-8 minutes for answers, please. Good luck.
Allora, per quanto riguarda...
So, as far as prevention is concerned, this is a topic which covers a number of the questions you asked me. I'm firmly persuaded that prevention is the number one strategic weapon against chronic diseases of the non-communicable kind, and also the communicable kind. Investing in prevention, therefore, is a priority for Member States and probably also for the EU. We invest 3% in prevention, which, if you compare it to our budget, is not enough money compared to the needs we have. All scientific studies and all the observations made over the last decade show that the majority of diseases, particularly chronic and non-communicable ones, come from poor lifestyles, going from health, food, to smoking, use of drugs, lack of physical activity and sport. We know how this can impact on food-based diabetics, the question of healthy lifestyles. And so eating more healthily and at least 30 minutes of exercise a day can be beneficial. In Italy, we calculated that a healthy lifestyle for a patient suffering from diabetes could lead to a saving of 3 billion a year in pharmaceutical spending. So we're talking about very significant amounts of money if you compare them to the general context. And that's why we believe that it's a strategic factor for the Union as a whole. We need to start thinking much more in terms of primary prevention as well as, of course, secondary prevention and screening, which are also utterly vital. Prevention, then, thought of in those terms as something that cuts across the various phases of our life, becomes part of a horizontal policy approach. And that's a very important way of tackling the sustainability of our healthcare systems. On the one hand, we need to make our healthcare systems efficient. We need to make them competitive despite the fall in resources that we're all seeing. We're going to get less money over the next years, but also we need to increase the efficiency. It won't be enough to balance efficiency against falling resources. It needs a change of lifestyle. We need to plan in terms of promotion. Europe can do a great deal. It can do a great deal if it speaks with a single voice. It has to make looking after yourself a cultural factor. People have to be responsible for themselves, not just as individuals, but also as a society. In my view, prevention is one of the most important aspects that we need to invest in. Going from 3 to 5% is a major objective, and I think that we can make a start thinking through how we get there. From that point of view, and I'll answer immediately another question, I can't remember who asked it, about the relationship with the economy. The environment isn't just a cross-cutting issue for the economy as a whole. It's also the case for health. And sometimes it's almost the same thing. It's not by chance that this is an Environment and Public Health Committee, because we know that health is welfare of people. Health and wealth is what we talk about. We've taken a step forward. It's not just an absence of illness that we're looking at. We've also got to have an approach which is different and all-embracing. The health of people, the health of animals, the health of what we eat, the health of our land and water, and the environment in which we live. We need to ensure that it's all sustainable, that production and work and welfare is all sustainable. That's what we're all used to and which we aspire to. And new technologies can help us out here. A technological leap forward on a very significant scale has been made by prevention and medicine as well. And that's something that we need to work on still further. The other topic, and I'm sticking for now with human health related questions asked me, is obesity. Now, obesity is always linked to prevention. It's not that I expressly did not talk about obesity, in particular child obesity, because I don't think it's a problem. Quite the opposite. I say it is one of the trigger factors that arise from poor prevention. A healthy lifestyle will involve preventing child obesity. Today we have the proof of this. If you start doing prevention in pregnancy, if you train and educate mothers, future mothers, on how their food will impact on the health of the child, then you can make some progress. Breastfeeding is so important, and there are new studies which show that there is an imprinting of lifestyles on children in the first 2 or 3 years of their life. This is part and parcel of the policies that we'll be discussing together, not just in the very many conferences we'll be holding. And I've given you so many opportunities to visit my city, Rome, as well as Milan. We'll also have a technical discussion of those issues there and try and really thrash the questions out. Another very important issue that's been raised is dementia. It's true to say that there was a plan on this in the French presidency, which was very important, and in October we had a discussion, December, in London during the G8. We talked about a global strategy on dementia. This is something where there is an approach, there are guidelines and action lines. Scientific research can help us here. We're learning new things all the time, new techniques and new pharmaceutical products to fight dementia. Alzheimer's really is a scourge for the next decades, and we've really got to pull out all the stops on the action plans that can enable us to deal with the social and healthcare issues here, as well as the strictly health-related issues. The negotiations on TTIP are extremely worth looking at. The negotiations are ones I've been involved in as an Italian minister in New York. The upcoming negotiations will be based on scientific evidence, and this is part of the draft for the negotiations. We've got to keep up the quality standards of our clinical trials and the European product standards, given that they are extremely high quality products, will be given particular attention. The health of our citizens is not negotiable. So the scientific basis for those negotiations will be weighed up by EFSA. TTIP really is a major opportunity, and I do think that Europe is big enough to be able to play that game in a really competitive and equal way. As far as food wastage is concerned, this is something of particular concern to me. Personally speaking, I've tackled this in the Italian Parliament. In a time like this, wasting food is ethically unconscionable, particularly given that you've got an increasing proportion of people in poverty in our societies, and it's known that the Commission is working on this, in particular with a view to revising Regulation 178 of 168 on this question. There are commercial as well as health issues here. It's part of the market. So this is a big issue in view of the timing. It's important for the Member States and the Council alike to focus on use-by dates and such like. Now, I've just lost my place, so I'm going to turn to medical devices? No, I'm not. I just wanted to say something about antimicrobial resistance, because this is more specifically still a prevention issue. In December, in Rome, there is the meeting to look at world antimicrobial resistance, and a great deal of work is being done here, and it's certainly an issue that runs through food, animal health, health care, and we need to make appropriate use of antibiotics, and we need to develop innovative technologies to be used in our hospitals to fight the formation of new viruses. And of course, we must also provide an incentive to innovation in the antibiotics field. If you look at the people and animals alike, we really are having to deal with the question of cleanliness. We need to have national guidelines and international guidelines that help us implement a very significant safety-based approach for ill patients and for food safety. On medical devices, this now is a very important topic, a very delicate topic, and there are a number of positions in play here, controversial positions. I think legislation has shown its merits, but is still subject to criticism. On the 26th of September, the Commission adopted a proposal for regulation of the Parliament and Council on medical devices. The Parliament has weighed up the proposals, and on the 2nd of April 2014, in its reading, the Parliament looked at it, and a number of meetings have been held by Council under successive Council presidencies, Cypriot, Ireland, Danish and so on. And there is an examination of existing legislation with a view to further enhancing patient safety. An intense set of activities in Council has been scheduled by the Italian presidency with input from the various technical groups. As you know, we've also sent out questionnaires to all the member states, and they are now answering us in detailed technical terms, so we're going to use the questionnaire as our working method. The aim is to define, by the close of autumn, a text that can be agreed by the majority of member states, which will represent a joint, shared Council position. And in the Health Council, in June, on the 20th, the majority of member state health ministers said they wish to see the matter concluded during the Italian presidency. So we're going to try and work together here. We're going to try and achieve a compromise in order to reach our objective of better text to enhance safety for all EU citizens. Now, there was a question about toxic substances linked to devices. Devices cannot contain toxic or mutagenic or carcinogenic or reprotoxic substances. This is something that we'll continue to look at in greater detail in the next meeting to be held in September on medical devices. I think I've lost my way slightly on the questions. Transparency, was that the next? Well, in terms of clinical trials, the original Commission text required a number of items of information to be supplied by manufacturers in the individual countries. In the meeting on the 8th and 9th of July, the Italian presidency made a specific request to member states to give their opinion on the information technology procedure here and to look at extending the requirements on manufacturers to add further information to the system. all the information on notification, development and adverse events would be covered. The proposal was virtually unanimously adopted by member states, and in the minutes you'll see reference made to look at the formal answers which were given, and the data will be made available publicly. We also had a question. As you see, I didn't manage to get all the questions down. Market scrutiny. A number of countries have agreed, others still adopt a different position on whether we can have a central organisation responsible for dealing with scrutiny mechanisms, for more critical mechanisms under Class 3 risks. We'll be weighing up with the other member states the utility of such a mechanism, which would need to be accompanied by notified bodies' involvement for high-risk classifications. So there are a number of technical things going on there. Some of the questions have already been resolved. Others we are still tackling in a constructive way, and we do hope that we'll be able to strike a useful compromise here. I think I've answered virtually everything there.
Well, I think that, yes, you did manage to answer pretty much all of the questions. Let's move on to a second round. Starting with the EPP, Mr. Kovacek.
Thank you, Madam Minister. I also welcome very much the Italian presidency for having put health among your priorities. You talk about prevention, healthy lifestyle and environment, chronic disease strategies, technology, all very important points. However, the issue of unequal access to good quality health care deserves stronger attention. Many patients in the European Union do not receive timely diagnosis and proper therapy in their home countries. Limited access to health care services reduces lifespan and further burdens our EU social and pension funds. Inequality in healthcare services provoke migration of patients toward European Union member states where medical treatment is better, in some cases life-saving. The same holds true for healthcare professionals, doctors and nurses who are leaving their countries for better jobs. The health problem is a common European Union challenge. While all EU member states are concerned, the problem is particularly severe in new ones. This can be seen from some of the country-specific recommendations adopted by the Council within the framework of the European semester for 2014. And I think this is a good instrument, what also my colleague Mr. Peterle said, for motivating the Member States to do more in the health reform. The Commission and the Parliament have already called for measures of the European level. My question is, in this respect, I would like to ask you whether the Italian presidency would like to address the problem of health inequality and put it on the Council agenda. And the second one, what the presidency plan in terms of legislative work, in particular with regard to the directive of transparency of measures regulating the prices of medical products for human use and their inclusion with the scope of the public health insurance system. Thank you very much.
Grazie al collega Kovacek.
Thank you. On behalf of the S&D, Mr. Pavel Pock.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Minister, I think there is one very simple question which is pertinent to the increasing incidence of cancer in the European Union, and it is the subject of endocrine disruptors. I mean, in particular, the issue of defining criteria which has taken a backseat at the European level. More specifically, regulatory criteria required for the identification of endocrine disruptors, nor a draft of new strategy has been proposed to date. And the program of Italian presidency, by my opinion, is not specific enough when it comes to the endocrine disruptors. So can you describe in more detail what concrete actions are you prepared to accept? What are you planning in this respect? Thank you so much.
Grazie. Adesso...
Thank you. Our colleague Buzoi now.
La ringrazio molto, continuare in inglese. Signora Ministro, my short intervention is related to one of important piece of legislation which is blocked now in the Council. is the directive of, for transparency of measures regulating prices of medicinal products. My colleague Kovacev already mentioned it. Not only because I drafted the opinion for IMCO committee or because I come from a country where the reimbursement list was not updated since 2008, but because I believe that this directive will bring more clarity and discipline in the process of establishing the prices and in the process of deciding if a medicinal product will be included or not on the reimbursement list. The terms are clear, the procedures are better, the transparency is increased. As you know, now the initiative is blocked in the Council, and I kindly ask you what is the position of Italian presidency on this directive, and if it's a positive opinion, I would kindly ask you to unblock the decision from the Council. Vi auguro molto successo.
I'd like to wish you every success under the Italian presidency. And I'm very sad that you have to leave almost immediately for the airport.
Buzoi.
Thank you, Mr. Buzoi. Our colleague, Mr. Caputo.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Minister, congratulations for that comprehensive presentation and the encouraging answers given to colleagues. 2 questions. One on the so-called risks derived from Wi-Fi. And journalists have been suggesting there's scientific evidence showing that exposure to low-level microwave radiation could be a danger to health. It doesn't seem that we've got clear guidelines on this, and we are hearing denials that there is a top-secret 350-page document, the International Symposium Research Agreement number 0569140, and the WHO, in that it would seem, had identified damage to the brain as well as reduced growth as a result of such exposure. Now, public health is a priority for the Italian presidency, and you're trying to promote healthy lifestyles and prevention, paying special attention to reducing the incidence of cancer and respiratory diseases. So, will the Italian presidency be disseminating this information if it knows about it? And what plans do you have to protect human health in all member states from this particular threat? Then, another question raised earlier was the idea of a tumours register. Does the Italian presidency feel it would be a good idea if we were to have similar tumour registers in the whole of the EU, as this is important when it comes to prevention too?
E adesso il collega
Josef Aia from ALDE.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, Chairman. And good afternoon, Minister. Congratulations for your presentation. I'll continue in English.
Worsened public health in the countries that were affected by this crisis, namely in my own country, Portugal. There has been an increased incidence of communicable diseases, and you said regarding the mental diseases, as you said, it was the fourth cause of death. Now, as I was saying, and deterioration of mental health indicators, such as higher rates of suicide, anxiety and depression, especially amongst the most vulnerable social classes. At the same time, public spending on health care decreased in most member states for reasons of financial sustainability. Meanwhile, rates of co-payment charged on users of the national health services increased significantly, which has the potential to introduce inequalities in access to health services. Minister, how do you foresee the Italian presidency role in regard to these challenges? Do you plan to take concrete actions in compliance with the principle of subsidiarity for the exchange of best practices between member states for the efficient management of their health systems in regards to disease prevention and healthy aging? As you said, Minister, the health of our citizens is a non-negotiable issue. Thank you. Grazie.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. Our colleague Gardini now. Yes, thank you. I'll be brief, because so many things have already been said. Thank you, Minister, for meeting with us. I think the approach presented here is very much in line with, for example, the report drawn up by WHO of the 5th of July on non-communicable diseases, which obviously is a subject of very great importance to all colleagues because the figures are alarming, and the promotion of healthy lifestyles and prevention obviously are of vital importance if we are to reduce the incidence of such diseases, which are one of the principal causes of death and diseases. So I do agree with that, but is that genuinely one of your priorities in the Italian presidency, to deal with this issue? It is something that's of great concern to me, and I did table an amendment, in fact, on that report. Then there's another subject that in the last term of office Parliament paid a great deal of attention to, and that was the directive on cross-border care. Now, we know that the idea behind this was to be long-sighted, far-sighted, whilst also making it possible to introduce rationalisation, which is, of course, something I know that you're concerned about, considering what you've done in Italy. Allowing savings in small countries that won't necessarily have centres for super specialised rare diseases, because then those cases can be sent elsewhere. So it would make it possible to rationalise. So, I don't know, maybe in Milan, maybe when the health ministers meet, but maybe another forum would be better to discuss this. And perhaps the members of Parliament that are most active on this could be involved, so as to relaunch this directive, because this is something Parliament likes, citizens like, but it is encountering obstacles and impediments which I think can be overcome, and I would very much like it if it were my country that was at the helm when we managed to, in fact, bring this directive into force, because I think it's moving very much in the right direction and could be of great use.
A te.
Thank you. Our colleague Kinishi now.
Grazie Presidente.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you too to the Minister for her very comprehensive presentation on the Italian Presidency's health programme. And I would also like to thank her for the very specific answers that have been given to the many questions asked. I have a question too that I'd like to put on a subject that you've already touched upon in your initial presentation. Last April, the European Parliament did conclude first reading on the motion for a regulation on the health chain. Now, that is a very complex issue, but it is vital if we are to ensure that our food is safe. And I wanted to ask the Presidency what initiatives they're planning to develop to ensure that this makes progress in Council, because it would seem that there's deadlock there at the moment. And it does seem that we are going to need informal controls through the food chain and to at least have common minimum standards. And again, does the Presidency think it will be able to follow the Parliament's position on this, asking for minimum frequent controls being harmonised across the whole of Europe? Thank you, Mrs. Kanishi. Our colleague Evi now. Thank you very much. Yes, I wanted to refer to the austerity policies, which have also affected health protection schemes for citizens across Europe. And there are some statistical studies that say there's a health gap now, which is very significant between the richer areas of Europe, which are more financially stable, and the less rich areas more affected by the recession. Aggravating the Italian situation, you have all the imbalances in the Italian system, in Lombardia, for example, and the cuts affecting health and health systems with a knock-on effect for Italian citizens. The whole approach now is that patients are becoming customers and health has become a profitable business. Do you not feel it's a priority to approach the political appointments, therefore, in the health system, chief medical officers responsible for policy, who are actually partly responsible for the fact that the system isn't working? Corruption must not undermine people's right to health and well-being. And that, of course, is a point in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. Plus, I'd like to stress and recall that there is a citizens' initiative on stopping vivisection. And I'd like to know what the Italian presidency's position is on animal vivisection. Thank you. A final two comments. Mrs. Pilar Ayuso, first of all. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Minister. I have a comment on behalf of Mrs. Grostet, which I must admit I endorse. We are 5 years on from the pharmaceutical report that was adopted in the European Union, and yet we see that the legislation is only being spottily implemented. For example, in France and Italy, legislation has been adopted nationally to extend the possibility of the use of medication outside of marketing. These decisions were taken for purely budgetary reasons, in spite of the fact that there are alternative options that exist and that are accessible both to French and Italian patients. This short-term decision is going to set a dangerous precedent and will, in fact, be a genuine challenge to European health. We do not want drugs to be used for anything but therapeutical purposes. An extensive use beyond marketing could actually undermine the health of patients, because these medications, if they're not authorized, will not meet with the requirements for our very high standards. This lack of compliance with European Union standards by member states is going to undermine the regulatory basis of the European Union and will limit the access of patients to given medication, and in particular limit their possibility of innovating and researching. And my question is, has the Italian presidency thought about making protection of the community acquis a priority and having a stricter policy when it comes to infringements of pharmaceutical legislation in member states? Thank you. Thank you. Last but not least, Aldo Patriciello. And then the Minister will answer all the questions. Yes, thank you. I too would like to congratulate you on your presentation. I do agree we need a prevention strategy harmonised amongst the different member states. I wanted to ask, Minister, though, how you intend to reinforce the European platform for rare diseases, whose social costs, although affecting just a very small number of people, is a very expensive issue for the member states' budgets. And then another question, whether you plan to look at the very restrictive provision in Italy on transposition of the directive on animal experimentation. With that transposition, Italy has made it difficult to carry out research activities in Italy, because we all know 97% of research animals are rats and mice, not large animals. But in transposing the directive, Italy has in fact lumped into one category rats, mice and larger animals. This is going to make research very difficult in Italy. All you need to do is look at the struggles being developed by the pharmaceutical companies and by the universities too, because this provision is going to create huge problems for research. Then another point touched on by Mrs. Gardini is on cross-border care. Do you not feel we should work towards harmonisation of the amount that people pay so as to avoid health tourism and speculation in this sector? Thank you, Aldo. I think no one else has asked for the floor, so we have gone through the speaking list, and I'd like to pass the floor back to the Minister so that she can try and answer, in as much as that is possible, all of the questions put.
Grazie. Grazie per le domande.
Thank you for the questions, and I have to say that they are all the hallmark of what we'll be doing either as a presidency or as member states. Let me begin with the topic of cross-border issues. This was one of the questions that have been raised. Italy has just adopted, indeed implemented, the cross-border directive, and many of the other member states are working on it. I think this is a big opportunity, the cross-border directive, above all with a view to our understanding of Europe. If you think about it, the cross-border directive is the first directive that genuinely deals with people in the European Union. In other words, people, citizens, their rights, not just economic subjects. It's a welfare directive, and that is its big innovation. Obviously, like all directives, which start with a great degree of innovation, it does need proper implementation and follow-up. In that connection, I think the directive has some internal assumptions which were made by the member states, see them as antibodies to adopt a health-based term. These antibodies will prevent the directive being used for health tourism or as a way of leading to some sort of speculation. In fact, it's very innovative. It sees the European Union as a large vessel in which you can conduct trials such as rare diseases, certain pathologies where we all in our member states know that we need some national centres to specialise, but with the feeling that those national centres will never get far enough, and therefore you need international or global centres. So this directive provides a huge potential for development in research to guarantee to our citizens significant developments in care. In the legislation, there's already an attempt to fend off excessive pricing, speculation or health tourism. We, in November, will be holding a very important cross-border event, I think the 6th and 7th of November in Venice, if memory serves. Not in Milan, in Venice. And there will be trying to attract a lot of attention to this event with Council and perhaps Parliament members there to discuss the huge potential and how to implement the directive in all member states in the best possible way. And still, in that same conference on the 6th and 7th, will be taking a wider look at the issue of tumours. This will give us an opportunity to tackle prevention, therapy and innovation within the same day's event that we deal with cross-border issues. If I could turn to another question on tumours, I think I was asked a question which I've now lost. Well, I'll come back to it. As far as the impact of tumours are concerned, we want to have a discussion in Europe about current and future strategies to combat them, and we'll look at initiatives already adopted. We've emphasised lifestyle time and again. We're trying to eliminate risk factors such as obesity, smoking I've already talked about, the use of sugars, salt and alcohol, trying to improve vegetable consumption and physical activity and so on. As a presidency, we really think we have to invest in promoting a healthy, active lifestyle, but also we need to support diagnosis. We need to look at the inequality in access to diagnosis, not just therapy. The economic crisis has meant that there's now unequal access to diagnoses. Now we need to look at what member states are doing there in terms of prevention. At the same time, we've got to look at things such as campaigns of vaccination to deal with various conditions, including HIV. On sustainability, this doesn't just relate to economic sustainability. There's also the need to look at the healthcare system as a whole and the ability of regional countries to access technological innovation. We have scheduled in our informal meeting an attempt to deal with this issue, which is so crucial for healthcare systems in our member states in the years to come. Bear in mind that this is a crucial issue in terms of European competitiveness as well. You can see that healthcare systems link up with other systems. They link up with growth as a whole and scientific research. The economic crisis has meant not just less access to therapeutic care and to diagnosis, it's also led to less money being invested in research and development. In the informal meeting, we intend to discuss exactly that issue. What strategies are possible here to increase the rate of innovation in our healthcare systems and research systems in such a way that we can guarantee innovation to benefit our citizens? Think about it. From that point of view, I really think if we face anything, it's a crossroads. It's a seminal moment. Europe has always, for as long as it's been united and living in peace over so many years, we've always given our citizens access to the top care available worldwide. We've given access to as much technological innovation as possible, and we really have to keep those standards flying high. These are quality standards, they're cultural standards and economic standards for Europe. It's a standard which guarantees competitiveness with the BRICS countries or the United States. We need to come up with a new developmental model, and we need to provide access to innovation right across the board. That is the very topic that we will be tackling in our half-year presidency and in that informal. Moreover, the Italian presidency has drawn up draft conclusions for Council, working together with the Commission, and this cooperation has been most useful indeed. We've drafted a document that we think, above all, will stimulate growth, the use of innovative medical practice, and the use of innovative drugs which meet the necessary standards, access for patients to promising methods of care, And also another important issue which has been raised is transparency. The Transparency and Pricing Directive. This is a very important directive which sets out the minimum pre-requirements as far as procedures are concerned to ensure that national measures are transparent when it comes to the setting of prices and decisions about reimbursement. More rapid access of pharmaceuticals to the market is what we're looking at here. These are things where there hasn't yet been an agreement between member states. And that's why we are working on it in light of the results from the last working party of the European Council, where there is a summary document bringing together the practices of different member states and highlighting differences. The aim is to come up with an objective, realistic view of the technical and political potential member states have. Now, there needs to be a necessary note of caution, but we should work towards the directive when the conditions are right. The need to review the current directive comes at a particularly critical juncture when prices are being set for the reimbursement of pharmaceutical products. There are some inherent concerns here. Hepatitis C drugs are the most salient example here. So we're working with member states there on new critical issues which have emerged, and we're trying to come up with as widely agreed a solution as possible. The question was raised about animal experimentation. The question was about stopping vivisection and legislation there. We really think we need to respect the rules which ensure as few animals will be slaughtered as possible, killed as sacrificed as possible. We're doing as much work as we can here, and obviously there's a big debate underway on the question on off labels, which is a very important topic. We have taken a view that we need to follow through the rules and regulations, putting citizens' safety foremost. Safety is our prime concern, whether we're talking about the presidency or me individually as a minister. Obviously, individual member states, following subsidiarity, will be able to activate those off labels provided safety requirements are met, and this is an innovative procedure in terms of clinical trials, and obviously the regulatory agency will play their part there. The presidency has every interest and desire to ensure that safety of patients comes foremost when it comes to pharmaceuticals. Mrs. Kinichi asked me a question. The presidency is aware of the focus of European citizens on safety of food right down the food chain. We believe it's extremely important to get consistent legislation with the highest possible safety levels, but that's not enough in itself. You need proper inspection standards and the right number of predetermined inspections agreed at a community level based on risk. And the food can be put on the market and exported in the whole of the EU, so we need to look at that. That means that we need the same checks to prevent distortions of competition. Therefore, we will try and achieve agreement in Council, even though positions are different today. The topic of food safety is very important and very relevant, and it's everyone's core concern. We're trying to harmonise here the various positions. I've come to a conclusion.
Grazie, permettete a nome di...
Thank you very much. On behalf of all of the members of the committee, I would like to thank Minister Lorenzin from the Italian presidency for having been so willing to answer so many questions that we've fired at her in quite a short period of time. So thank you to her, thank you to you all, and that concludes this committee meeting. Tomorrow there's a coordinators meeting, and then on the 3rd of September we have another Environment Committee meeting. So thank you to everybody and have a nice evening.